Welcome back to the Solutions Lab. I'm Chris Phillips, D&H's Solutions and Presales Team Lead. Today, we're going to be going over projection solutions. Now, we've probably all sold projectors in the past, but actually quoting an entire projection solution can be somewhat of a nightmare for those who are unfamiliar with the glossary of terms that go with it and all the complicated things that you need to know to actually spec out a proper solution. So today, we're going to be doing a bit of a lab experiment here where we're going to set up a conference room, we're going to do a site survey for that conference room, we're going to do the build of material for the conference room, and we're going to show you how it all comes together. Now, along the way, we're going to be going over a glossary of terms that you'll probably need to know to be able to do this yourself later when you're in your customer's environment. Don't worry. We're going to have all these terms down below in the description in detail that you can reference a little bit later, but I will be kind of touching on what each one of these means throughout the training. So to start, we're actually going to do a site survey here in the Solutions Lab in this little conference room we've set up. We're going to then do the build, and then we're going to come back in here and show you how it all comes together. Now, for this experiment, we have a conference room that sits anywhere from 15 to 20 people here in the Solutions Lab. And we're basically going to make sure that the customer is going to be happy with the solution we're putting together. And really, the customer's only ask for this environment was to make sure that the conference table stayed as clutter-free as possible. They didn't want the projector on the table itself, and they don't want any wires on the table to connect to the projector. So we know whatever connection we make to the projector has to be wireless. So with that basic piece of information, what else do we need to know about this environment to actually quote a proper solution? Well, there are really 5 questions we need to answer. And these questions change based on the environment we're going into. If you have been doing a site survey for K-12 or House of Worship and you need to know what information you need to know for those environments, email us, proav@dnh.com or solutionslab@dnh.com. More than happy to help you out for those. But to start in this conference environment, the most important piece of information you need to know is how far the furthest viewer is going to be from where we're actually going to end up putting the screen. That piece of information is going to help us decide how large of an image we need for the environment. Basically, if we know how large the image needs to be, for that furthest viewer to be able to read the text on there, we will be able to quote out or pick all the other pieces of hardware in our quote based on that information. The next piece of information we need is to make sure we know the dimensions of the wall that the projection screen is going on. Basically, so we don't get a projection screen that's too big for our wall. The next piece of information we need is to kind of take note of the ceiling in the room. For the Solutions Lab here, we have drop ceiling, which actually is a little bit easier to mount to than you would think, and we'll show you the hardware you need for that a little bit later. Next, we need to know where we can actually mount the projection device on the actual ceiling. For drop ceiling, that actually becomes a little bit easier because each one of the tiles have a set distance, 2 feet in our case, of their width. So you can actually count out the number of tiles in the ceiling, 1, 2, 3, 4, and know that you can go, hey, 0 to 6, I can mount my projector. I can't do it for the next 2 tiles, but I can do it for the following tiles, so that's 14 to 16. And you'll be able to quickly jot down the actual distances you can mount your projector at. That's going to be important when we start talking about throw ratios and actually selecting our projector. The final piece of information we need to take note of in the room is the ambient light situation. And we're actually quite lucky here in the room. The fluorescent lights we have are dimmable in this conference room that allows us to make the room a little bit darker should we need to be able to visually see the screen. If you're not able to do that, you need to take note of where the light is coming from and if you can dim the light in any way, shape, or form, especially if you're going to have direct light from the sun coming in from a window hitting the actual wall it's going to be going on. There are screens that you can use to help mitigate that light that we'll show you in a little bit, but take note of it, but in this case, we're a little bit actually lucky. So with all this information we have, we're going to go back to our workshop. We're going to start selecting screens and projectors. We'll show you how these all fit together when we come back into the conference room in a little bit. So we'll see you in a couple minutes. So here we are in the workshop, and it's time to start building out our list of materials that we're going to need for this projection solution. Now, you may think we're actually going to start with the projectors themselves, but we're still missing a key piece of information before we can get to that. How large of an image do we need for the conference space? And to figure that out, we're actually going to use one of our good old friends, math. Don't turn off the webcast just yet. I'm going to make it as simple as possible. Just bear with me. In 2016, AVIXA, one of the largest organizations that represents the audiovisual industry, put out a new standard to better calculate image size based on the furthest viewer from a screen in certain environments, especially conference room environments. Now, without getting too deep into the math, it can be simplified into a pretty easy to remember formula. Your image size should be 1/5 the height of the furthest viewer from the screen. So if your furthest viewer is 100 inches from the screen height should be 20 inches. Now I know what you're saying. They don't measure screen height in inches. They measure screens in diagonal dimensions, like 55-inch diagonally. So what do we do about that? Well, to help us with that part, we're going to use the Daylight Screen Builder to actually go in and start taking a look at some screens. The tool will also be able to show us some screen options and show us some terms that you need to know when you're selecting a screen for your customers. So without ado, we're going to jump into the Daylight Screen Builder, we're going to pick out a screen, and then we'll move on to the projectors after that. So here we are in the Daylight Screen Design tool, and the first option you're going to be picking from is the type of screen you're actually going to be looking for. Now we're ultimately going to pick a pull-down manual screen, but I want to show you a couple of the other options because they're going to be pertinent to projection selection a little bit later. Now, if we're in an environment where we had to use a short throw projector, we'd actually probably need to go with something that was tensioned, whether it be a fixed frame or an electric screen that is tensioned. That is because, as we'll show you in a little bit, if you're using a short throw projector in a non-tension screen, the image can actually look a little bit distorted. Kind of looks like the image is sitting on top of water. It's not a great viewing experience, but in our case, I don't believe we're going to be going with a short throw projector. We're going to be going with a normal throw projector. So the normal manual pull down is just fine for us. We're going to go into the next section here, and just in the daylight world, they're kind of giving us a couple of options. We're going to go with the Model C. Model C and Model B, the only difference is the actual size options that are available. B is a little bit smaller than C. B is usually made for small conference environments. C's are for medium and large, so we'll go ahead and go with that. And this is kind of where we get into the first area in which there are some terms that we may or may have not seen before. On these three selections, there are two terms, gain and viewing angle. Let me go ahead and explain what each of these are. Gain refers to the amount of brightness that the screen reflects from the actual projector. So if a screen has a 1.1 gain, like this matte white, it is actually going to reflect 100% of the brightness that is cast onto it. Where if you go something like a 1.1 gain screen, it's actually going to project, or it's going to broadcast 110% of the brightness off of it, making that image even brighter from the projector to the screen. As you can see, you can obviously keep going up with a gain of 1.5, which is roughly equivalent to 150% of the brightness that you're getting from your projector. So you can start to see that if you have a lower lumens projector, you can actually pair it with a higher gain screen and still get a brighter image. The drawback that, however, is in the viewing angle selection. As you start ramping up the gain, in most cases in screens, you actually start to decrease the effective viewing angle. And what the viewing angle means is the angle in which you could actually sit at the screen off center and still view a clear image. So at 1.0 gain, it's 60%, at 1.1, it's 50%, and then it gets all the way down to 35% when you get up to 1.5. If you remember in our conference environment, it was very straight, long, narrow conference environment. So viewing angle, not crazy important, but I still don't want to go overboard. So I'm going to go with a 1.1 gain screen. It's usually awesome for most conference environments. So here we are at the next selection. This is where we're actually going to pick our screen size, and there's a lot of information on this table. So I'm actually going to skip the description row, and we're just going to go this row by row and explain what each one of these are. The first is the format, and the format actually is referring to the aspect ratio of the screen. Aspect ratio being the ratio of height to width of the screen. The most common one that you guys have probably heard of is 16 by 9. That's the aspect ratio of 99% of most televisions that are on the market today. And that is actually represented on this chart by HD TV. All of these screens here have a 16 by 9 aspect ratio and are really good for home cinema use, anytime where you're actually going to be projecting mostly video content. Right below it, SQ actually stands for square, which means the aspect ratio is 1 to 1. That means the height and width are exactly the same. It's not a really commonly used one. You do see it used in some office environments where you change the aspect ratio of the projector, but in this case we want to make sure the screen is going to fit the actual aspect ratio of our projector, and we're never going to use a 1 to 1, so we're going to move past that. The one right below it, NTSC, is actually the old video standard of old CRT monitors and old tube televisions. It's 4:3. It's very common in the days of VGA, but since we've kind of moved past these days, we're seeing less and less of these format screens, and we're seeing more and more of what is below it. And that is wide, which they call 16:10. That is more of a computer aspect ratio that you would get for presentations, off of laptops, off of your displays. It is a more common aspect ratio for the office environment. So that 16 by 10, that wide aspect ratio, is the one we're going to be using here. And now if you remember, over here on our notes, we had a furthest viewer distance of 263 inches. And when you divide that by 5, it comes up to roughly 52.6 inches. So we need a screen that is at least 52.6 inches tall. And on this next column, we're actually seeing the actual height of the screens here. So when we go on the wide, this first one here, this 94-inch diagonal screen, has a height of 50 inches. So that's too small. And the next one right above it is 57 inches. We're actually going to go one step above that. We're going to go with the 60-inch one. You know what? We'll go with the 65-inch one. It's a 123-inch diagonal screen, but the actual height is 65 inches. So we're giving ourselves a little bit of comfort play here to make sure that the image that we're putting off from the projector will be legible, even if they have a presentation with very small text. We know that the wall that it's going on is 14 feet by 11 feet. We'll actually kind of see the overall dimensions of the screen when we're finished with that. So I think that one looks like the best option for us right here. So we're going to go ahead and select our 123-inch diagonal screen. We're going to put in black casing and kind of just leave all this stuff. This basically means the casing it comes in and the color that surrounds the actual screen. We'll keep it black and black. We don't need any of the floating mounting brackets for this as well. So when we're finished, we're going to see an option over here on the left. It's going to say View Drawing Image. When we click on that, it's going to take us to a download. It's going to open up a PDF of our screen. And on this PDF, we can see the actual total dimensions of our screen. In terms of total width, we're looking at 111.25 inches, and in terms of total height, we're looking at 70 inches, or 70.25 inches. So that's more than fits into our 14 by 11 foot wall, so we're fine there. So now that I've done this, I'm going to actually take this PDF, I'm going to save it, I'm going to send it to proav@dnh.com so they can give me a quote on this screen itself. And then we're going to kind of move on now to selecting the actual projector because we know our image size. So now that we know our screen size, it's time to get to the fun part. We're actually going to get to pick our projector now. Now there are two types of projectors you can go with in a scenario like this. You can go with a short throw projector or a more traditional long throw lamp projector. There is a third type, a lampless laser projector, which we've talked about in past webcasts, which you can find in the resources below. But in this scenario, the environment's not very brightly lit, and they're not going to be using the projector for 8 hours a day. They're going to be probably using it for 2 to 3 hours a day, putting its use somewhere close to 600 hours a year. When you start to get into a situation where you're using a projector for 2,000 hours a year, that's when you actually want to start thinking about a laser projector, even if the area is dim, because you're going to save money on the overall maintenance of that projector. But for our purposes, a lamp projector will just work just fine. Now, what I did say when we were selecting our screen, if we wanted to use a short throw projector like this, we needed to select a screen that was tensioned. You can see when you use a short throw projector in a screen that is untensioned, you see that wave look that we talked about earlier. So since we didn't pick a tension screen, we're not going to be using a short throw in this scenario. But if you have a scenario where you don't have an actual ceiling to attach to, or you want to attach very close to the wall, these are great options. Just make sure you select a tempered or a tensioned screen. So what we're going to go with here is a traditional lamp projector. And what I've selected here is an Epson PowerLight 2250 projector. The key specs on this thing is got a 5500 lumen lamp and an aspect ratio of 16 by 10. That 16 by 10 aspect ratio does fit our screen, so we're good to go there. Now the lumens, if you're familiar with them at all, might seem a little bit high, especially for the ambient light we're dealing with in our conference room. The reason I've selected a little bit higher lumens on my projector is I intend to run this thing in its eco mode, which is going to bring the overall brightness of the lamp down, but is going to help the lamp live significantly longer. In case you didn't know, as soon as you turn on a projector, the lamp brightness, overall brightness, immediately starts to decrease. So it might be at 5500 lumens day one, but even after 7 days, it might be something like 5450 lumens, and it's going to continue to decrease as you use that projector through the course of its life. So being able to use it at a lower brightness in an eco mode will extend the overall life of the lamp itself, and still making sure that I'm getting a bright enough image for the actual screen. So that's why I went with a little bit higher brightness. I think this is going to be able to last them easily 3 to 4 years before we replace the lamp. The next most important spec from this projector is actually something called its throw ratio. Throw ratio is a little bit complicated, so this is how I'm going to, so we're going to go ahead and explain it for you. The throw ratio refers to how far the projector needs to be from the screen to achieve a certain image width. So we've been dealing with image height and diagonals before, now we're dealing with image width. Our screen width is 104 inches. So we need to make sure that the projector can project an image that is 104 inches. So the throw ratio is actually the image width times the throw ratio can give us a distance where we actually need to set the projector at. And now you're going to get two actual throw ratios, and the throw ratio can be anywhere between it. The first one is the minimum, and the minimum for this projector is a throw ratio of 1.38. And when you multiply 1.38 by 104 inches, you get a minimum distance from the screen of 143 inches. The second number was 2.28, which is the maximum distance, or which is the maximum throw ratio. And when you multiply that by the width, you get a maximum distance of 238 inches. Now, that screen can be set up anywhere between 238 and 143 inches. And that actually does fall in with one of our earlier questions, the actual site survey of where we can mount it on the ceiling, because I had an open panel between 20 and 22 feet. So we're going to go ahead and be able to mount this projector right there. There is one more key spec, or one more key item you need from this, though. Now that we've selected our projector and selected our screen, we need an actual way to mount this to our drop ceiling. Chief has a product that we actually can install above the drop ceiling. That it's actually just a steel panel that we'll show you in a couple seconds that will sit above the drop ceiling. We'll have a pole that comes down from the drop ceiling, and you can mount your projector safely from there. And it doesn't look like it has a really clean look to it. So we'll need that as well. And we also like to select a universal projection mount for the projector. You can get mounts that are customized to each projector, but we don't typically like to use those because if you swap out your projector, then you need to swap out your mount as well. The universal mounts can be moved in any way, shape, or form to fit pretty much any projector out there. So that's why we typically recommend the universal projector mounts. So with all that being said, let's jump back into the room. Let's show you how all this stuff came together, and we'll take a look at what the solution looks like as a finished product. So here we are back in our conference space, and as you can see behind me, we have the projection screen hooked up. We have the projector hooked up. We'll take a look at that in a second. And hooked into the projector, we have the ScreenBeam 1100 that we selected. On the projection screen size, we did go with the pull-down screen. It is fit to our aspect ratio, so we're not having any extra white in our screen, so it fits uniformly as well. It is the 1.1 gain, so we're getting a little bit more brightness off the screen than the projector is putting out as well. So that side of the solution is pretty much straightforward. If they want to have the screen, they pull it down. When they're done with it, they pull it back up. Again, electric options are available if they wanted that as well, but they were trying to go a little bit lower cost. Now for the actual projector itself, we're going to take a look at the mounting solution. We're actually going to go above the drop ceiling. We're going to take a look at how that looks from above, how the panel goes in there, and we'll also take a look at where the ScreenBeam is actually living. So let's actually go up into the ceiling and take a look at that. Hey everyone. So here we are above our conference room, and I wanted to show you what it looks like above here once we've got everything installed. So to start with, here's the actual plate that we use to mount the universal projector or projector mount to the actual drop ceiling. It is a plate that literally just sits right in on top of the panels themselves. The plate screws into the actual steel guides that are up here and are tied down as anchored to the ceiling by these guide cables. So in case the drop ceiling gives out, they've got an extra anchor as that as well. This is actually going to support the entire weight of not only our projector, but the mount as well. So there's a tube right down here in the middle. That's actually going to be the steel pipe that goes down to the universal mount. And through this pipe, we can actually route our AV cables. So you can see we have all of our AV cables that we need for the projector right here. They're going down the pipe to the back of the projector. So we're set up on that point, and there's only one other piece of this equation that we're missing. We're still missing a way to actually physically connect a video source to this projector. And to do that, we're actually going to be using this. This is the ScreenBeam 1100. It is a wireless solution that allows us to wirelessly connect pretty much any device from this to this box down to the projector. It's also very universal, so I can install as many of these as I want on any projector I want, and the experience is going to be the same throughout the entire building. So it's going to be very seamless. And to show you what that looks like, let's go back down to the conference room. We'll take a look at what it looks like. One sec. So here we are back in the conference room, and I want to show you how we're going to be connecting our devices to the ScreenBeam 1100 that we have installed with our projector solution. Now, the ScreenBeam 1100 is a device that allows pretty much any office device to connect to it wirelessly for presenting purposes. Now, you can do it with a projector or display, whichever you'd like. And the way this works is actually pretty simple. All we've done to the ScreenBeam 1100 is turned it on, plugged the HDMI out to the HDMI in of our projector, and actually plugged it into the same network as our office network. And we've connected these devices to our office network as well. You can operate the device without connecting it to the office network. You would just have to connect these devices to the Wi-Fi network that the ScreenBeam puts out itself. This way it's a little bit cleaner, and I don't have to jump through so many hoops. So what we're going to do now is connect these devices wirelessly to the projector. And how to do it is actually pretty simple. I haven't done any extra configuration to the screen being, and on the screen itself it says if you want to connect your Windows device to the screen, you hit Control or you hit Windows key K, and it brings up the connect screen. And I'm going to hit the screen beam here, and it's going to go ahead and automatically connect the screen beam, or connect this laptop to the screen beam, and the screen beam is going to put the image on the projector. And as you can see, I'm already on the projector. I can go ahead and start my PowerPoint presentation. And it's as simple as that, and my PowerPoint presentation comes up there, and I can go ahead and get started with my presentation, not a problem. But it works for more than just Windows devices as well, and I want to just go ahead and show you that. I'm going to disconnect this Windows laptop from it. It's going to take it back to the main menu, and we're going to use an Apple device as well. We're going to use this iPad, but it also works with iPhone and MacBooks as well. And when you're on an iPhone or any kind of iOS or Apple device, what you want to look for is the screen mirroring and the functions. And I'm going to hit screen mirroring and then go to the screen beam here. It's going to put up a code for me. I'm going to put in this code. I actually think I put it in wrong, 323. Go ahead and hit OK. And it's going to go and then connect my iPad to the projector as well. And as you can see, very quickly, I'm now casting my iPad to the projector. And as you can see, for the iOS devices, screen mirror is just right here in your command center. And I can still go in the same thing, go into my PowerPoint presentation. It's the same presentation I had up on the Windows device, and I can go ahead and control my PowerPoint presentation from my Apple device as well. Very easy. You can use Android as well, whether you have an Android phone or tablet. So it pretty much takes any device that's going to come into your building and connect to your projector without having any wires or any need to do I have the right dongle or anything. There's no software that was downloaded on any of these devices. It works relatively easy and very, very clean. So I hope today you've learned a little bit more about how to quote out projection solutions. Now, obviously, this is just a small tip of the iceberg. There are so many different projection solutions out there. So if you have any questions about this or anything else there in the world of projection, feel free, drop us some questions. We have a live Q&A coming up. If you're seeing this after the fact, solutionslab@dnh.com, proav@dnh.com. Those are two email addresses that you can send any of your questions to, and we'd be more than happy to help you out. But thanks for joining us, and I look forward to talking to you in the Q&A.